And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing the Work, the first show on the Back Home Network covering IU women's basketball. This is our 150th episode, a glorious, victorious episode. We'll get to that in a minute. Doing the Work, recorded on Saturday, February 15th, 2025. I'm your host, Jeff Marlow, joined today by my co-host, Kathy Amos. And today we will be discussing your Indiana Hoosiers' big, huge, lopsided rout of the in-state rival Purdue Boilermakers, 78-56. This brings their record to 16-9 overall, 8-6 in the league. And as we do with every show, we'll start with our banner moment. And Kathy, this is simply for me, 12, the number 12. 12 straight, an even dozen straight wins in this rivalry for the Hoosiers. And I thought it was interesting. I was watching the pregame before this, the game, and I was like, man, or a little run up, I should say. And it's like Sydney's talking about how she's never lost. I was like, please don't jinx this. Please don't jinx this. But no, 12 straight victories for the Hoosiers. That's our proud banner moment over the Boilermakers, that is. Our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, the presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, which includes the Assembly Call, Crimson Cast, X's and Joe's, and the Dribble Drive. Home Field is constantly releasing new schools or updating their products for schools in their existing line. So you're bound to find for you or anyone in your life that just loves great collegiate gear, anything you want. Not only do you get quality apparel, but you are supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelly School of Business. Go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23, that's HOME23, to get 15% off your entire first order. That's promo code HOME23 for 15% off. Once again, the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. And in a little bit of news around the Hoosier program, Mackenzie Holmes officially signed with the Seattle Storm this past week. So news there. She was drafted by the Storm last year, but sat out the season as she had knee surgery. So it'll be interesting to see how she possibly fits into that roster. But let's throw it over to my co-host, Kathy, for the Amos angle here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Saturday for all of you joining us live, or if you're listening after the fact on Saturday, or whatever day you're listening. Happy Beat Purdue Day. So yes, it's always a good thing to beat Purdue. Like Jeff mentioned, this is 12 in a row. It's really been lopsided, and it's just great to see it continue, and not just continue with the win, but another lopsided win. So I think I heard not only have we won 12 in a row against Purdue, but I don't think they won at Assembly Hall since like something like 2011, 2012, somewhere in that neighborhood. I know it was before actually Coach Moore became the coach of the Indiana Hoosiers. So it has been quite a run, and a lopsided run for the Indiana Hoosiers over those Purdue Boilermakers. And, we'll get a chance to go up hopefully to Mackey and do it again on the road, like we have seen us do in the past as well here at the end of the year. But, in the last show, we talked about this being a Purdue sandwich here to end the season with our last 5 games. So this is a good way to start that first slice of bread on our sandwich with a great win. So excited to talk about it here today. Looking forward to this one for sure.
Yeah, so let's just jump into it. And Kathy likes to take advantage a little bit more of pivotal plays. And I'm going to talk about just the tempo, the mojo they had in the first half, especially the first quarter. 20-2 before you really kind of even knew what happened. Purdue forced into 2 timeouts, which didn't really help them any. But that energy that we talked about in the last episode, we wanted to see them bring it home. Now we can just find a way for them to take that. And Sid talked about it after the game a little bit. So Kathy, I'll kind of throw it back to you, just maybe get some more specifics. But I just love the atmosphere of the gym. But I love the Yarden and Sydney, especially the energy they were bringing, and just fueled that whole really first half.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that first quarter really got us off on a first step, right? Obviously, we beat them 30-10 in that first quarter. And you're speaking of Yarden Garzone, she had the team's first 7. And then Sydney jumped in with a 3 from off of an offensive rebound by Chloe McNeil to put us up 10-2 over Purdue to force the first timeout. Later on, we had another great start and jumped out to 20-2. So we scored another 10 unanswered points in that run, forcing another Purdue timeout. So they had 2 timeouts that we had to force in that first quarter. And I thought that was, a great way to start the game. In fact, I thought Purdue just demonstrably looked slower than us. So in fact, we had 11 fast breaks in that quarter. Fast break points in that quarter alone. And on the defensive side, we forced 7 Purdue turnovers that led 13 points. And those two statistics alone, the fast break and the turnover points off turnovers, I think was a huge contributor to our play in that first quarter. So they just looked, in my opinion, I thought Purdue just looked a step slow on every facet of the game from beginning to end. Now, I'll turn it over to you again here to talk about the rest of the game. Clearly that first quarter was by far our best. I really did think that our energy slipped out after that. It wasn't as energetic, but then again, you're up by over 20 points at one point, up 30, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And so, human nature, it's just probably a little easier to take your foot off the gas. But that first quarter, I thought it was just a thing of beauty.
I really thought, even though they didn't score as much in the second quarter, I thought the energy was there. They turned it over a little more because they had 5 turnovers in the second quarter alone, but they only had 1 in the first. I thought, 6 is not bad. We'll talk about the turnovers a little bit more as we go along, but they were forcing turnovers. I think Purdue had, what I hear on the broadcast, 14 or 16 turnovers in the first half. I think it was, they said
13.
So,
Yep. Purdue had 13 turnovers in the 13.
First half. Okay, I thought they said it was a little higher. But anyway, 13 turnovers in the first half. And for a Purdue team, and Kathy, I agree with you, we're not here to talk about Purdue, but we've also talked about, we don't necessarily think IU is the most athletic team in the league. And yet we looked fast. We looked more athletic. One of the things Purdue has struggled with this year has been A, scoring on their own, but B, stopping other teams in transition. I thought the coaching staff did a great job of really, in my opinion, emphasizing that, especially to early on, to try and get out in transition. And again, kind of for the game, the fast break points were very lopsided for IU. So, but then I felt more like the third quarter got off to a little bit of a start. And then I felt like the fourth quarter really didn't live up to where they'd been. And if you look, they only scored 11 points in the fourth quarter. And I just felt like that's when I really kind of saw the energy and the focus lose. But I did feel like they lost some in the second half, but hard when you're up 48-22 at the half. It's just, like you said, human nature.
That's right. Yeah, I agree. I wrote that down too. I think like if you had our energy level or attention maybe level in terms of quarter, I think it started off uber high and then just kind of tapered off a little bit more and more each quarter. Yeah. And don't misunderstand me. Like, I don't think our second quarter was bad by any means, 18. It just felt like we did have a step back or step down on that, and with the attention going on to detail, like I mentioned, the quarters, or the turnover. So, in the third quarter, that was really, Purdue, we went on a long scoring drought. We had Purdue go on a 13-0 run. So we had the lead at 30-18, dropped the lead to 30-18 at one point. So that 30, we were up by 30 points. And like I said, they allowed them to kind of, quote unquote, get back into it. And we're only down by 18 with that 13-0 run. But I did like how we ended the third quarter, and maybe we can talk a little bit about Lily more or in the later, or if you want to talk about her now, but Lily got her first bucket right at that third quarter mark with 0.1 seconds to go. So it was close, but it was a pretty little turnaround jumper from the game, but at the buzzer. But I kind of thought Lily again just felt like she was pressing things again. She missed another wide open bunny underneath the basket, and it just seems like she's overthinking things, Jeff, at this point. And I was really hoping in this game she'd have a chance to kind of turn around and get things going again for herself. But it was nice to see that turnaround jumper at the buzzer go down for her. That was her 2 points for the game.
Well, she's on the struggle bus right now. I mean, that's just, we can flat out admit she's on the struggle bus right now. And I agree with it. But when you look at it though, most of the shots came from 3 players today. So it wasn't like with 12 minutes, she didn't have a ton of opportunity. She only took 2 shots. And one of those was the buzzer beater you're talking about at the end of the third quarter. But what I want to say is I saw something today that made me feel good about Lily. And again, she's on the struggle bus on the floor. But at that first timeout that Purdue took in the first quarter, who was the first kid off the bench that was congratulating, that was excited? It was Lily. So she's not sitting over there pouting. She's not over there, at least outwardly. I don't know what's going on in the locker room. I don't know what's going on in the gym per se, in the practice gym, but at least there on game day, she's engaged. She was happy for her teammates. So that told me a little bit about the makeup of the player and about the kid. And I thought that was a good sign, because when you played as much as she has this year and over the last 3 years has been sitting there thinking it's going to be my turn, and now you've lost your spot. It's real easy to kind of go into that spot where you just like, I'm mad, and we've seen this a little bit from Jules at times, where we feel like Jules has kind of gone into that spot. But let's talk about Jules real quick. I thought Jules gave us 16 positive minutes today, and I would like to see her get a little bit more, but I can live with the 16.
Yeah, absolutely. Although, yes, in a normal game, I guess, Jeff, I would hope in a game where we were able to go up by 30 and against a very vast inferior team like Purdue, I was really hoping to see our bench get more points, or more playing time. In fact, that fourth quarter, maybe we can jump and talk a little bit about that. We really struggled coming out. We did not get our first bucket until 6:40 in that fourth quarter. And so I was going into the quarter, sitting on my lovely couch thinking, gosh, this is going to be great. Maybe we'll come out and run the lead up a little bit. And at the media timeout, we'll empty our bench. And that didn't happen. In fact, we didn't empty our bench until about 2 minutes and 45 change or so to go. But we had 4 turnovers in 4.5 minutes and didn't score for almost 4 minutes. So it was just not a good way to start that fourth quarter. And I think that led to Coach Moore in keeping those, more starters in for longer instead of being able to empty the bench. And we can talk, on the off season about what that means big picture, but we really need to, and it's not just wear and tear. So don't get me wrong. That is part of it for sure. Our players, about 7 of them have been playing the vast majority of the minutes, and that does catch up with you. It's not just that; it is also building to the future. Getting Faith Wiseman some more minutes and getting Jules some time. And we can talk about Kladikova too, if you want, because I think a little bit that we saw from her again in the 3 minutes that she played. I like what I see from her. We know in other games she can shoot the jumper. Today she drove the ball and finished through contact and made her free throw. So I think there's things there that we can build on, but we're just not able to kind of maintain that lead in this game, unfortunately, to get them a huge amount of time. And so I know I'm nitpicking on a 22-point win here, but here was the game I was really hoping to get really significant minutes for our players off the bench. And I just didn't quite see that we were able to get them quite as much as I was hoping for anyway. So that's where I am kind of with it.
No, we didn't. But I'm going to withhold on Kladikova a little bit until I see more of a bigger sample.
Yes.
I mean,
those
we
3
know
minutes aren't enough. What?
No, I just over the year, I want to see more in the offseason. I want to, we can somebody hope we can talk about in the offseason. Obviously, one that we're going to talk about in the offseason who's been gone all year that I feel like really could have made a difference in the bench strength is Lene, because I really feel like Lene 100%. Would have had some minutes as we went through the season. But your big key there, Kathy, today, kind of let's move on. Unless you got some, let's kind of move this into the notable numbers here real quick. I'll tell you this, nobody played more than 30 minutes. Even though, the bench really didn't get emptied until the last 2.5, 3 minutes, nobody played more than 30. I'm at least happy with that. Would I have liked to have seen maybe nobody played more than 25 today? Sure. But nobody played more than 30. And now we get a few days off before the next game.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. So, so let's see. Numbers wise, I want to start with our shooting. So after our last game where we were in the 30s, today we shot 50%. In fact, in the first half, we shot 58% from the field. And again, another nice get right game. Again, get the idea that the opponent was quite a bit inferior in playing at home, but we were 50% from 3-point land and shot 8 for 16, including 6 for 10 in the first half. So, it looked good to me from a shooting perspective, and they looked a lot more comfortable with themselves than we did in the last couple of games.
Well, and if they had just a decent fourth quarter, that number would have been around 55, 56% for the game, but they were way down in the fourth quarter. Again, we talked about some of the struggles in the fourth quarter already, but the shooting was very horrid in the fourth quarter. So that, that explains some of that, but still shot 50% for the game. I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to look at I kind of briefly mentioned this or I kind of preluded it a little bit or foreshadowed a little bit, use my English skills here. 20-3 on fast break points, 20-3. And that just told you a little bit about the way the game was being played, especially early on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mentioned that when we were talking about the pivotal plays that in the first quarter, we had 11 alone. We ended up with 13 in that first half. And we just continued to exploit, I think, the fact that we were a much faster team. Mostly positive today. Of course, the one negative we always have to look at, I think, with this team, unfortunately, is just the rebounding. Again, with a team like Purdue, you would expect us to out rebound them. Purdue is at a rebounding deficit on the average this year, but they did out rebound us. Now, it was only 30-29. So I understand that. But again, I would just really like to see if, next year we can figure out as a team, because, at this point with 4 games to go, we are who we are as a team, and we're just not going to be a strong rebounding team. But it would be great if we could figure out next year how to improve that, because it didn't matter in this game, but, you have this kind of rebounding night against the, Ohio State, who we'll talk about coming up here later as our next opponent. It's going to really cause some problems again to be able to go far into the Big Ten tournament and see what we can do in NCAAs if we are able to get there. So rebounding is probably the only negative I think I see in the numbers for me today, Jeff.
Yeah, the negative for me is 16 turnovers. You can kind of live with that, and we've kind of been saying we need to accept that as kind of a new normal. 16 doesn't beat Ohio State. It probably doesn't beat Maryland. Michigan State. You got to find a way to get that number back down around 13 or 14. I know people say it's only a couple. Yeah, but each one's those games are going to be tighter. Those possessions become more important than when you're blowing somebody out by 30. When you look at that, you had 15 turnovers after the first quarter. So the turnovers for me are a negative.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jeff. I was only looking at Purdue's, which was 24, and we had 27 points off of those turnovers. So at least we won that battle today, but that's a really great point. You do 16 points or turnovers that lead to 15 Purdue points. That's just not going to cut it again on the game we have coming up on Thursday against Ohio State. So in terms of some other numbers that kind of jumped out to me, again, it was a nice, I thought, assist game today. Again, we had 18 assists on our 28 made field goals. So that is always something that this team is known in terms of their identity is sharing the sugar. And so I thought we did a pretty good job of that today. Now, maybe a teeny bit down compared to what we have seen in some of really amazing games, but we've also were driving the ball a lot more today, which of course doesn't lend to having those huge assisted field goal numbers that we have seen in a couple of our other wins. So that was nice to see, though, that continued there. And then the last one, I'll kick it back to you, that I wanted to just bring up for me was points in the paint. Again, mainly because of our driving today. And like you mentioned, in our fast break points, we had 36 points in the paint to 28. And I thought, at least down low, Purdue had a couple of girls, both their starting center and their one coming off the bench, that had quite a bit of size on us too. So they definitely could have had a place where they got more points in the paint, but I think our aggressiveness and our fast break really helped us win that battle there as well.
Well, I'm going to go to an individual here and talk a little bit real quick, because I'm not sure she's going to get too much talk in the game ball or the hardest worker, but Caroline Strickland led the team with 5 assists, and so they, talk about distributing the ball. We were getting it into the post, and Caroline was making some decent decisions. Now, she didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but her 5 assists with 2 turnovers, that's pretty solid for a post player there.
Yeah, I thought that's a great call out too, because I thought Caroline, didn't have her best night in terms of offensive proficiency. She was only 2 of 6 shooting. She didn't make all 4 of her free throws, but yes, when she wasn't able to get a good shot off, she was doing a nice job assisting other players. So, yeah, that was nice to see as well. Maybe the other person we might mention here too before we move on to our other segment is Chloe Moore McNeil. She was the only other starter not in double figures. Like you had mentioned, there was about 2 or 3 players. Excuse my dog, sorry. 2 or 3 players that really led the way in terms of shooting. But Chloe, I thought she did a nice job again on defense, especially. But yeah, she ended up with 7 points on 3 of 7 shooting and 1 of 2 from 3-point land. But she did add 4 rebounds and 4 assists as well.
Yeah, and I'll save, I guess, one other one for when we get to the awards, but I think I've kind of gotten two people I'm pretty much in mind for who I'm going with. So if you got anything else, we'll bump it back to you. Otherwise, let's go into game ball here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're watching here live on the YouTube feed, live with us, live twice, real good. Anyway, if you're here with us on YouTube, you can see that Kathy has the scroll up here. And right now, our game ball winners so far have been Yarden Garzone and Sydney Parrish with 5 each, Shay Chesky and Chloe Moore McNeil with 4 each, and Lily Meister and Caroline Striplin with 3 each. And since I'm hosting, I'm going to throw it over to Kathy and let her go first.
Yeah, this to me came down to 2 players in particular, which I'm assuming are the same 2 players for you. I thought, and you mentioned them earlier in our podcast here, Sydney Parrish and Yarden Garzone. I thought from tip until the time they left in the fourth quarter really led the way in terms of offensiveness and aggressiveness of what we're going on with here. So it was hard for me to kind of decide between those 2. So Sydney had 19 points, including 3 of 5 from 3-point land. She contributed 3 rebounds. She only had 2 turnovers, and then she also had 4 steals. Yarden had 18 points on 7 to 12 shooting. She had 8 rebounds, but she also had 4 turnovers and 2 steals. For me, where I ended up landing, Jeff, I'm going to go with Sydney Parrish on this one, not just because she led the team in points. I mean, it was only by 1 over Yarden. But I liked her aggressiveness on steals, or on the defensive end. And, she led the team in steals with 4 of our 13. And one of the moments I didn't really mention that I had kind of wrote down that was one of my favorite plays was from Sydney in that third quarter. She had the ball, or she was on defense. She got the ball back with the steal, but it almost goes out of bounds. And she ends up just hustling after that ball, saved it from going out of bounds, down to Shay Chesky, who got another fast break layup, and then and one attempt that Chesky made put us up 58-29 in that third quarter. I thought we saw a lot of plays like that from Sydney all game, not just on the offensive end where I thought she was, aggressive, looking for a shot, taking it when she wanted it or had it. I thought she played amazing defense as well. So for me, I'm going to vote for Sydney and give her my game ball.
Yeah, you went to the 2 I was on, and I was going to lean with Sydney anyway, just because of that. And also for Sydney, another huge number in there that you didn't mention, 0 fouls. Sydney had 0
That's
fouls.
Right. That is huge.
So with that, and also for the first game, I thought maybe it helped. First game, we've seen her not play with the knee brace. And so,
yes.
Obviously she's feeling better. She's feeling more comfortable. And I think that probably helped with her movement a little bit as well. And I'm with you. We're going to go with Sid for the game ball here, and that'll jump her into the lead with 6 game balls for the season. But before we move on from that, I did want to throw out Shay Chesky. Shay had 16 points on 6 of 10 shooting, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc. She was 2 of 2 at the line. But Shay only had 1 rebound. She did have 3 assists and 1 steal, but she also had 3 turnovers. So Shay at least deserved to be mentioned in there as far as that. But I thought, I'm with you. Really what put it over the top for me with Sydney was her defense today. I thought, she brought a lot of energy. She was locked in defensively. So congrats to Sydney on the game ball for today. Let's move on to the Grace Berger hardest worker of the game. Again, for those of you who are watching live with us here on the YouTube feed, this has been a fun year from this standpoint in this award. Right now, Chloe Moore McNeil and Sydney Parrish both have 5 to lead the way. Yarden Garzone has 4. Caroline Striplin, Shay Chesky have 3 each. Lily Meister with 2. Jules Lamandola and Hannah Sandvik each have 1. And again, I'm going to throw it over to Kathy and let her go first.
Yeah. This is also where I was going to mention Shay as well. But you already did. So I'll just jump right into it. I'm going to go ahead and give Yarden my Grace Berger hardest worker for this. I thought after 2 really, really rough games for Yarden earlier at the Michigan and Minnesota, especially Michigan, where she only had 2 points. She was really struggling in those 2 road games. Again, like mentally you have kind of 2 paths, right? You can kind of withdraw within yourself and spiral, or you can bounce back. And I thought this was an amazing bounce back from Yarden. And that showed a lot of mental fortitude on her part. And like I mentioned earlier, she scored our first 7 points as well. So that's who I was going to vote for my hardest worker. A lot of it mainly from the bounce back and the middle side of it that Yarden really had to come back and have those 18 points in this game.
Yeah, and probably a noble number we should have thrown out here. The IU team only had 12 fouls all game. 7 of them were by your 5 spot. Between Striplin and Meister, they had 7 of the 12. So, again, I'm with you. I'm going to go with Yarden here because that's where I really was going with this anyway, so I'm not going to say too much more. But I felt like Yarden was just more aggressive. I won't necessarily say she was outworking a whole lot of people, in terms because I thought they were all playing hard. But I thought her focus and her aggressiveness was really good today, right from the beginning. And that's what we need her to do on the road a little more. And where was it? Was it Washington where she brought that? But that's like the only game on the road where she's really kind of brought that focus and intensity, or at least for the only time in a long time on the road. So congrats to Yarden Garzon. She will become the leader with the hardest worker with 6 now in that category. And let's move on real quick. And Kathy can update us on Yarden's 3-point field goals.
Yep. So just the quick update on that. That's the last really of the numbers watch that we're going now that some of the other milestones have been achieved. So we were watching 3-pointers made. Yarden had 2 today. That takes up to 197 for her career. So to get into first place all alone, she needs 206. So that means she needs 10 more 3-pointers on the year to take over that sole first place spot that we're kind of watching. So she's currently in 4th place. She needs 3 more for 3rd now at 200. And then, but really getting close to that, excuse me, all-time 3-pointers made at 206.
Anything about this game you want to touch on, Kathy, before we talk about our next one?
No, I think just yes, I guess no. And then I continue to talk. Yes. They're just, this is what we needed from the team today, right? To go in and come back home after 2 tough road losses and have an inferior team in Purdue and your rival come in, and they just came out and they were ready to go at the tip of this game. And that's what we really wanted to see. And that's what we talked about in our last podcast previewing it. And for the most part, I think we got it.
Yeah, we talked about it on the podcast after the Michigan game. This was a get-right game. This was a must. I hate to say it that way, but this was a must-win because losing today would have been a quad 4 loss. And it's not great for your bracketology. We're still right now, Charlie Cleveland had his latest bracketology yesterday. IU is still a 10 seed. They'd be going, at least according to his projection, down to Baton Rouge to be in the LSU. And I think he had them playing Louisville, and they're still one of the last 4 byes. So I think they're not, I don't think there's too much that can really knock them out right now, except maybe a first-round loss in the Big Ten tournament. But they got to find a way to maybe steal one. They've got 4 games left. With that, or wait a minute, we're 8 and 6. Yeah, 4 games left. We got 4 games left. You need to steal one of these, I think, because right now you got to think maybe they're not going to be favored in too many games down the stretch. But, and I'll talk a little bit about this. We do the roundup of the Big Ten. I'll save that. But so we do have coming up here, Ohio State coming into Bloomington on Thursday night. That's a 7:00 start Eastern, 6 Central, and that game will be on Peacock. Ohio State is legit. They have been for a while. And you look at their record, and they've only lost all the games they've lost have been in the league. They've lost to 2 of the 3 best teams in the league in terms they've lost to both USC, UCLA. So they're going to be a tough game here on Thursday. And that's maybe one thing we didn't consider enough of when we did our preseason projections, that how many of our tough games, the teams that end up kind of at the top of the league, end up being at home. UCLA, USC, Ohio State right now, 3 of the top 10 teams in the league, all been at home. Some of our easier games have actually been a little bit on the road. Now, we felt like we gave a couple away, but for the most part, our tough games have been at Simon Scott Assembly Hall. And the crowd today, by the way, was fantastic. The listed crowd was just over 12,000 today. But anyway, Ohio State leads the series 62-26. The last meeting was in Columbus last year, a 74-69 lead, 74-69 victory by Ohio State. IU was actually up 5 at the half, but they trailed by 8 after the third quarter. And that really is where the game was. It was in that third quarter. You had a 13-point swing. Kevin McGuff is his 12th season with the Buckeyes. He's 20 at Ohio State. He's 198 and 102. He's 103 and 57 in the league. He's a 4-time Big Ten champion, regular season champion, 1 Big Ten tournament title, 3 Sweet 16s, and an Elite 8. He has 11 previous seasons at Washington and Xavier, where he had some success as well. So I'm going to let Kathy talk about some of the key players. I'm sure we're familiar with at least a couple.
Yes, that's right. So, Ohio State is not coming in ranked in the top 10 in the nation or sitting number 3 in the Big Ten because they only have 1 or 2 players. They have 4 players that average in double digits. I think the ones were probably top of the list for me is Cody McMahon. She's coming in for her junior season. She is averaging right now 16.4 points per game, and she's averaging 4.7 rebounds per game. Followed right behind her is Jeloni Cambridge. She's averaging 14.6 per games, 4.7 rebounds, and then she is also at 2.2 steals. Chance Gray is their 3rd leading scorer at 13.4 points per game. And then Taylor Theory, I think that should be another name hopefully everyone's familiar with. She is averaging 10.8 points per game, 5.6 rebounds, and 2.4 steals per game, which is 2nd in the Big Ten. So between Taylor and Jeloni, not surprised, with the Ohio State press and their defense that they're known for, which we'll talk more here when Jeff gets into the team numbers. Not surprised that they have 2 players in the high end of the Big Ten in steals per game, with Jeloni Cambridge at 2.2 and Taylor Theory at 2.4. So those are just 4 of their players to keep an eye on, but they are pretty stacked. And so this is definitely going to be a tough out for us.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, though. I love Cody McMahon's game, but for me, when I watch Ohio State, and I've not watched a ton of Ohio State, I've caught bits and pieces of some games. To me, Taylor Terry is the heart and soul of that team. She may not be their leading scorer, but she's kind of the engine that makes them go. And so that's who I'm going to be kind of watching to see who the matchup there is. I could very well be Chloe, but I'll be interested to see who that matchup is, because to me, that's a huge matchup, because I think Taylor Terry gives them somebody that we don't necessarily match up the best with that. As Kathy mentioned, they're playing well. I said they only lost 3 times in the league. They're 21-3 overall, 10-3 in the league. They play Iowa on Monday in Columbus, so we'll get a little bit of rest here. So they're going to come off a game on Monday, have to travel, not a long trip from Columbus to Bloomington, but still going to have to travel a little bit as well. But they average almost 80 a game. They're the 17th scoring team in the country, 4th in the Big Ten, though. This still tells you a little bit about the Big Ten. You're averaging 80. You're averaging officially 79.7, and you're 4th in the league.
I had to double look at that, Jeff, when I was putting those numbers together this morning. I'm like, oh my goodness. Well, that tells you how stacked the league is.
Yeah. Defensively, they only give up 61 a game, though, and that puts them at 91st in the country, but 6th in the league. Indiana's 8th, by the way, coming into today. These are all numbers coming in before today's game. And by the way, the IU Purdue game was the only game in the league today. There are several games tomorrow that we'll talk a little bit about as well, because they'll affect where Indiana shakes out after the weekend in the standings. They shoot 49.5% as their effect. Well, wait a minute, I skipped one. I'm sorry. They shoot 45% from the field. That's 48th in the country, 8th in the Big Ten, but they're 49.5% on effective field goal percentage. So they're not a great 3-point shooting team. They average 32% from beyond the arc, which is 147th. So that's the one quote unquote flaw you may have in Ohio State, is their long distance shooting. They're 283rd in 3-point rate, Kathy points out in the run sheet here. Surprisingly, they're a minus 2.2 on rebound margin. That's a little bit surprising, but, and here's what Kathy was alluding to, they're plus 10.7 turnovers per game. That means they're turning over the other team almost 11 times more per game than they turn it over. So that's, again, that 16 turnovers today against Purdue bothers me just a little bit, because we've seen Ohio State do this 2 years ago in the Big Ten tournament. We were leading at the half, and they turned, the press just ate us alive. And I'll never understand why, because we played them before and didn't fight. Well, I do know McKenzie wasn't playing, but there was the safety net there. But this is a team that can turn you over in bunches. And so that plays out there. Kathy, you got anything you want to add in about the stats in the team here?
Yeah, just a little. I mean, you hit on all of it, really. At the end of the day, this is yet another game where we're going to have to be playing our A plus game to pull this one out, even at home. We saw that against USC and UCLA. We just don't have the depth or the athleticism to keep up with some of these teams right now. And so to try to keep up with them, what we're going to have to do is exactly what you're saying, Jeff. We have to somehow figure out how to limit our turnovers, which is what Ohio State is known for, right? We're just not going to put up the points that, we've seen in the past. We're averaging 70 points per game. Ohio State is only allowing 61 points per game. On the flip side of that, our defense is okay this year, allowing 63, but with Ohio State averaging 80 points per game, we're really just going to have to figure out a way how to step it up on both ends. But I think you're exactly right. If we have too many turnovers that are, Ohio State capitalizes on, especially those live ball turnovers, we're going to be sunk at the end of the day. So yes, rebounding is something to keep an eye on too. I'm more concerned about the rebounds, because if you are turning the ball over, you're not shooting the ball, which means you're not rebounding the ball, which means you're not getting assists and everything else that we've been talking about in terms of good and positives and negatives for this team. To me, that's the absolute number one key to the game.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Seems to always be for us. So real quick, let's take a trip around the Big Ten here. In previous games, since our last podcast, we talked a little bit about this on the last broadcast. One that we kind of overlooked, I think. Nebraska goes into College Park and just absolutely routs Maryland on their home floor, 91-71. And then Minnesota goes into Columbus and takes the Buckeyes to overtime. The Buckeyes end up winning 87-84. And then the game we talked quite a bit about on the pod, or at least it really highlighted on the podcast, USC stayed alive in the race because they were able to beat UCLA at USC 71-60. Juju had, what they say on the broadcast, 38 points and 8 blocks.
Points. Yeah, it was crazy.
38 points and 8 blocks in that game. So that was UCLA losing for the first time this year as well. So games we want to keep an eye on coming up tomorrow that really do have some bearing on where Indiana is going to shake out here in the Big Ten standings at 8-6 right now after the weekend. Oregon goes to Minnesota. Both those teams, well, Oregon is tied with IU at 8-6. Minnesota right now is behind us at 7-6, I believe, but they could get to 8-6. Nebraska goes to Illinois. As Kathy, Illinois is at 10-4. In the league. So again, a tough game, but Nebraska just went on the road and won a tough game. Michigan State goes to UCLA tomorrow. Then we already highlighted Iowa and Columbus on Monday. Michigan goes to Maryland on Monday. And then on Wednesday, Michigan State at USC. So Michigan State on the West Coast trip here, or the LA trip. So couple games there that if Indiana can find a way to win Thursday, they're going to jump some people in the standings, because a couple of those teams are probably losing games. And like Michigan State, they could play well and still go 0-2 on the weekend. So, or for the week. And so that's a chance for Indiana to kind of jump some people here. But so this becomes a big game. And Kathy, I'll let you kind of do a little highlight of the standings real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, I put that's a lot of games to try to keep track of if you're only listening verbally, and we have no things up for you on here. So what, we really want to, why we were talking about so many games is because of the standings. Like Jeff mentioned, USC now jumps into first place, technically at 12-1. UCLA, of course, is right behind them at 11-1. So for all intents and purposes, they're tied. We already mentioned Ohio State 10-3. Yes, Illinois is at 10-4 in fourth place. And so that Nebraska game is important because we are tied with Nebraska in a 4-way tie for 8th place with Oregon, Iowa, Nebraska, and ourselves at 8-6. And like Jeff mentioned, Minnesota is knocking on our door there too at 7-6. So it's exactly what we talked about in the preseason. It's the same thing we've been talking about all during the season. Every one of these games matter, especially in that, kind of middle chunk of that Big Ten. It matters for a number of reasons. It matters for your seeding in the Big Ten and potentially trying to get a better seed in the NCAA tournament. Like Jeff mentioned, right now we're only a 10 seed. Maybe we'd rather have that than an 8-9 game. I don't know. I don't see that we'll be able to move up much past, 9 or 10, nope. Maybe an 8 if we really make a big run here in the last part of the game. But folks, we're down to 4 games in the season. We already talked about the Purdue sandwich to end it. Purdue is the first slice today. We've got some big games coming up here with Michigan State, Maryland, and Ohio State. We already mentioned Ohio State coming up next, but then we still have 2 more tough teams before we get Purdue again to end the season. And that one's going to be on the road. And again, I understand Purdue is way, way down this year. They showed they were vastly inferior to us in terms of talent today. But you go on the road to your rival, you got to be careful with that one too. So they just have to go out here on Thursday and see if they can go and steal one. It sounds weird to say this, steal one at home against Ohio State, because that's kind of where I'm at right now. We're net ranking. We're probably going to stick around where we're at, which is right around 37th. But again, in the season here on a really positive note, go into the Big Ten tournament and see what you can do.
Well, and the other thing is you get that, if you're one of the first 8 seeds in the Big Ten, you at least get a bye. You get a 1-day bye. You don't have to play out that first day. So you want to try to avoid some of that if you can with it. So you're trying, or I should say it there. Yeah, you're trying to avoid playing as long as you can the Big Ten tournament. Less days you have to play, more games you have to win in a row is always going to be a key. So I'll be interested to see how this kind of shakes out over the next couple of days, because like we said, with Maryland playing and Michigan playing, somebody's losing there. So Maryland's either dropping back out of, to us, or Michigan's dropping back to us possibly with 6 losses.
Right.
So it's hard to really, like Kathy said, to kind of visualize it maybe on the podcast, but that's, there's a jumbled mess basically between 6 and about 12 is what you're really looking at.
That's right. And you got Michigan State's got to go through that out, California gauntlet here this week on Sunday and Wednesday. And, they're sitting at 9-4, but if they lose both that games, they're dropped down to 9-6 as well. And so you just now throw yet another rock into the bag to mix up.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not only that, the bottom part of the league is kind of really separated itself in a bad way. Now Purdue is on the opposite side of that. They're trying to stay out of, because remember, the bottom 3 teams don't go to the tournament this year, to the Big Ten tournament. So they're in that fight to try and avoid that. And I don't know how the tiebreakers will pull out of that and all that. They've only got 2 wins in the league, but that's why it's such an important thing here that we're talking about the standings. And like Kathy said, so Kathy, I'll throw it over to you for final thoughts here, and we'll wrap it up here today.
Yeah, I think, I've been kind of saying my final thoughts throughout. I'm glad we went and took care of business today. So, it's always fun to take care of business at home, but it's even more sweet to take care of business in a 22-point win over Purdue. It just makes me really happy. As many of you know who listen to the show, I live out in Des Moines in Iowa. So there's a lot of Iowa State fans here today. And I guess on the men's side, Iowa State just signed a home and away with Purdue coming up here on the men's side. And I said to my friend, well, at least you'll know for sure Iowa State will be my favorite team in 2 of those games. Because my favorite teams are Indiana, whoever's playing Purdue, and whoever's playing Kentucky. And so this was just doubly sweet today. So I'm really happy we took care of business. Now we just got to continue that here on Thursday and really clean things up and hopefully play with a full 40 minutes of aggressiveness and some, cleaner play on Thursday.
Yeah, and I think that come Thursday, Caroline Strickland needs to have a really good game. I think a post player can help neutralize a little bit. We saw this with McKenzie. I'm not saying she's McKenzie. I'm not trying to make that comparison, but a strong post player can help neutralize some of that, especially if you can take care of the ball. That's the one thing that Ohio State struggles with. If you can keep your turnovers down, they've traditionally struggled with with good post players. So we'll see what happens. And again, I said already as well, it was a get right game. They took care of business, and it looked like they had a ton of fun doing it. So Hoosiers improved to 8-6 in the league, 16-9 overall. And then we'll talk about what's coming up here after this break. And as we said, we'll be back on Thursday, February 20th, when we'll recap the OSU game. I believe that game. So look for us to be on around 9 Eastern, 8 Central. That game is a 7 o'clock Eastern time, 6 o'clock Central time start. So look for us to be on around 9 Eastern and 8 Central. If you want to see us do the show live and be a part of the live chat, the Workaholics, make sure that you just subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/@Backhome Network. That's the @ symbol, youtube.com/@Backhome Network. You can be a part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. Special thanks to John Ringer of rigdesign.com for designing our logos. Big thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you've heard throughout the broadcast. And thank you for listening wherever you are. We'll be back to talk about IU hoops again with you on Thursday. Until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers.
Awesome. Hey, good job. 150 episodes of doing the work, Jeff. That maybe that's our second banner moment in our now that we've finished the show. So that was fun to write that when I was putting the run sheet together. I'm like 150. Who would have ever thought we'd make it this far?
I really was thinking about that being the banner moment, but I thought it sounded selfish when we've got 12 wins in a row over Purdue. So
it's a good thing we left it for after many after dark things.
Yeah,
So,
Mark here on Doing the Work. We're celebrating 150. So
yes, that's right. It's a great accomplishment, I think. So
a
thanks to all
labor
the
of
people
love.
who've been here for all. That's right. Thanks to everyone who's been listening to all 150 of Jeff and I kind of blathering on, or whoever's been some guest hosts with us and stuff. It has been some fun. But yes, labor of love sometimes. But this one was by far not a labor of love. This was a really joy to do today. So I appreciate you being here.
So, well, Kathy, I'll let you go so you can enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, you too. All right.
I don't know what's like in Iowa. It's cold here.
Yes, it is also very cold here. So cold and dreary, and we're supposedly getting a little more snow. We got about 7 or 8 inches of snow earlier this week too. So we've joined the snow club. Finally, it was late for us this year, but finally there, I guess. So yay. Gotcha. All right. With that, have a great weekend, everyone. Yeah, take care.
Bye.